Welcome to the Cosmic Business Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia Pallas, and this podcast is for soulful entrepreneurs who want to harness the cosmic power of astrology to elevate their message, unlock flow, and attract their best clients ever. Join me every week and get excited to discover how you can use the energy of the cosmos to get the business breakthrough you've been waiting for. Welcome back. Today we are talking about working with the moon for better launches and better productivity in your business. So the moon is one of the most important planets or objects in astrology. And that's because it's the closest planetary object to Earth, and therefore it has the greatest impact on us. So noticing and harnessing the phases of the moon can help you not only manage your time and energy, it can also help you to accept or understand when you can be really productive and visible and when you need more rest and introspection. By following the phases of the moon, just like many keen gardeners, surfers, and fishing experts do, you can notice those cyclical changes over the month and plan your business accordingly. Now, before we get into each phase of the moon, I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the symbolism of the moon and what it actually represents in our own charts. The moon is symbolic of our subconscious desires, needs, and our emotional processing abilities. So it's really important to understand more about your own moon sign and to understand where the moon was or what phase the moon was in when you were born. This will add an extra layer of nuance when you're working with the moon in your launches and in your business. Because if you know what phase of the moon you were born under, you get a deeper insight into your own personality, but also you get an insight into what time of the month you might be most in flow, most turned on by your work or by your life in general. Understanding that part of you can be super helpful when it comes to planning out your months and your year overall. So let's talk about the phases of the moon. And for the purposes of today's episode, we're just going to talk about the 4 phases of the moon. There are actually 8 phases of the moon, but we're just going to talk about the main 4 phases. So when the moon is new, this is when you can't see it in the sky at all. This is generally the best time for starting to plan new things. This is the seed planting time, and the energy of the project or the idea or the launch event is likely to build over the month. It's the same reason gardeners plant seeds on a new moon. It's to harness that building energy. So while it's a really good time to plan new projects or plant new seeds, your energy tends to be lower at the beginning of the moon cycle. So it's not a great time to be scheduling activities that require a lot of energy or enthusiasm or activity. It's more of a preparation phase. You need to rest and recuperate before the next phase of activity ignites. So the new moon is a beautiful time to invite what you want into your life and set some intentions for the month ahead. You can even do something like a manifestation ritual to supercharge your intention setting. And that obviously depends on the moon itself, because some moons are a little tricky for intention settings. For instance, if it's a solar eclipse, not a great time for intention setting. But in general, most new moons of the year are a good time to lay down some intentions, plant some seeds for your business, especially thinking about the zodiac sign and the themes of the zodiac sign that new moon is in. You might want to do something like a new moon tarot spread or some sort of journaling activity to really think about what you want to be considering for the month or the next 6 months or even the next year. light a candle, think about the themes. That's a beautiful time to be doing this, to be really grounding into those intentions. Some new moons are extra powerful as well, and that will just depend on the energy, the aspects the moon is making, and that's something to keep an eye out for, to keep track of what's happening astrologically with the moons as well. And as I said, some moons are not great for manifesting or, setting big intentions just because of the energy, the aspects around those new moons or the type of moon that it is, for instance, an eclipse. The next phase after the new moon is when the moon starts to fill or bloom in the sky. This is the waxing phase, and we can start to feel more confident and energized when it comes to being visible in our business, attending events, or taking action on our goals. This is a great time to begin a launch or to run a promotion in that building phase. Like when you're kicking off a promotion, that kind of waxing phase of the moon, the early waxing phase of the moon, is a really great time to start getting your ideas or your offers out there and really work with that building energy. The momentum then becomes strongest once the moon is more than half full. This is the gibbous phase. But the thing about that is that you may need to adjust or tweak something to get yourself back on track, because this is kind of like where things start to, square off, when our ideas and our momentum starts to kind of get some traction, and therefore there can be challenges presented to the way you want to go. So you really need to bring yourself back on track around this time and check in with the intentions you set at the new moon and start taking that committed action to move things forward in your business. Now, when we get to the full moon phase, this is the height of the lunar cycle. This is where everything comes to climax or complete, right? This is the big energy of the moon cycle. And because of this heightened energy, some people can feel particularly anxious or emotional around a full moon, depending on how susceptible they are to the energy of the moon, or how vulnerable they are, or how connected they are to the energy of the moon. And, if you have a lot of, for instance, Cancer energy in your chart, Cancer is ruled by the moon, you might be even more sensitive to when the moon is full. You might be feeling even more emotional at a full moon. So something to know about yourself as well. So you can feel anxious, you can feel emotional, but it can also be a tremendously exciting time for big events or to bring things to a climax. For instance, to run the most important launch event for your marketing campaign around a full moon, to really harness that energy. It's also got a completion energy. So when I'm working in the sales process, in the launch process, I often think about having the big sales event at a full moon, because it's a natural completion energy. So if people have been following along for some time, they really do want to take action around a full moon. If it's for them, it's not like it's completion energy for everyone, but if there are people in your network that have been thinking about taking action, if you can capture their attention around a full moon, they may be more likely to complete. You may be more likely to make that sale. The energy is there for completion. So be careful not to overdo it at a full moon, but you can really use that energy to get more visible in your business, to close some deals. Like, this is a great time for that. As I said, I generally encourage my clients who are doing live launches to close their cart at or around the full moon to make the most of this strong and constructive completion energy. So you might be building up to this kind of full moon close cart energy. You can also just have a big event for your launch around a full moon. That's totally fine as well. It really depends on the type of launch you're running or the type of promotion you're running, but you want to make that kind of key event around that time. It's also a time to look back on how far you've come during the month. It's a really great time to start thinking about what you want to release that feels heavy, or forgive yourself for things you didn't get done. And full moon energy is really a lot about giving thanks. It's a lot about gratitude. It's a lot about what you've achieved and manifested from the new moon or from the new moon 6 months ago, and giving thanks to what no longer serves you. And this is where something like a fire ritual to release what's not serving your highest good can be a really great tool. Obviously, you want to do this in a very safe way. You'd need something like a fireproof bowl or a large saucepan. You want to write down the things that you want to release and burn them in your special sacred cauldron, right? You want to rip it up and throw them to the fire. This is about releasing so you can make room for growth, make room for space to try something new in your business. And this energy then flows on into the disseminating phase, where the energy and momentum from the full moon start to fall away until we get back to the new moon. So in the disseminating phase, it's a great time to start tying up loose ends, to get your paperwork or bookkeeping sorted, and start getting ready for the next cycle. Right at the end of that disseminating phase, you also want to allow lots of space for rest and self-care, particularly just before the next new moon, which is known as the balsamic phase. It's when the moon gets dark again, right before it hits that new moon phase. That's the healing phase of the moon cycle. It's time to soothe yourself, to let go, to think about the next dream that you have, to allow that daydreaming space. When you think about these phases of the moon, you also want to pay attention to your own energy during these phases because, as I said earlier, different people are affected in different ways. And if you are a woman or you're in an estrogen-based body, it's a great idea to keep track of and honor your own monthly cycle as well. For instance, don't push ahead with something because the moon is full if you're about to get your period and you know this makes you want to retreat. You have to honor your own cycle. And this is where your natural phase of the moon comes in really handy. For instance, I was born at a disseminating moon phase, at third quarter disseminating moon. So I know that actually at the time after the full moon, in that kind of waning period, that is when I'm often my most creative and inspired. That's my natural phase of the moon. That is when I get my juice to kind of spread my knowledge, to give what I'm here to give, teach what I'm here to teach, all of that stuff. That's when I feel the most juice. So it's really good to know that. Really good to know that about yourself. Really good to understand your own phase as well as understanding the phases in general. So if you want to have a look at the signs the moon will be in over the rest of the year, both new and full moon signs, there will be a link in the show notes so you can look at that, because it's really important if you are going to work with new and full moons to understand what zodiac sign the moon is in, because this really colors the intentions you're setting, the things that you're working on, and the energy of that moon. So for instance, right now we are coming up to a full moon in Aquarius, which is in quite a tricky position with Saturn, and it's squaring Uranus. So there's a lot of crunchy energy going on. This is not going to be a particularly fun full moon for us, but it will highlight some themes that have been playing out over the past year or so while Saturn has been in Aquarius. So it's really good to get an understanding of where the moon is sitting within the sky, within the constellations. So, one more thing to note about the moon and working with the moon. In 2022, as I've talked about in the forecast episode with Christy Gray, and I will talk about going forward, is that the lunar nodes are in the signs of Taurus and Scorpio at the moment. And now the lunar nodes, or the nodes of the moon, are not actual physical points in the sky. They are mathematical calculations based on the moon's orbit. But we have the south node and the north node, right? And at the moment, the north node is in Taurus, a very practical, earthy, security-focused sign. And the south node is in Scorpio, a very deep, probing, intense sign. It's often related to psychological issues. It's often related to our inherited patterns, that kind of thing. So think about what's going on in the world at the moment and how that relates to this north-south axis. Because when the eclipses happen, these are powerful points of change and release and can be sudden insight as well. The eclipses will mostly happen in Taurus or Scorpio over the next year. It's already been happening for the past 6 months. We are dealing with Taurus or Scorpio, full moons or new moons, eclipses. So these eclipses are not great times for intention setting or for doing any kind of ritual work if you're not experienced at working with eclipses. Their energy is quite erratic, and that's why we don't recommend working with them. They have their own power naturally. You don't actually need to do anything. The eclipses are very powerful astrological events to be aware of. And so I just would like to point that out to you. If you are working with the moon, it's really important that you understand where they're happening in your own chart, but also when they're happening so that you don't inadvertently use one of those moons for a manifestation ritual by accident or try and work with that moon energy. You've really just got to be aware that it's coming and acknowledge what it's shaking up in your chart. They can be wonderful, wonderful activating events, and they can also be wonderful clearing events as well. So those things are really great to keep in mind if you are working with the phases of the moon. All right, there will be more on the moon coming soon. Please let me know what you think of this episode. If it helps you to start working with the moon phases, I would love to know. Please drop me a message on Instagram, tag me in your stories. I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining me on the Cosmic Business Breakthrough. If you'd like to learn more about what I do, head to sophiapalace.com or follow me at Sophia Palace over on Instagram. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the show if you found it helpful and share it with a few friends. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.